Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Friday Live on Friday, the 3rd of November. We are definitely in the countdown towards the end of 2023. I feel like this year has just flown by. I cannot believe it's November. Happy Halloween to everyone who celebrated Halloween over there in the US. I think you do at the same time in Canada. We do celebrate Halloween here, but nowhere near as well as you guys do. So I've got a few clients over there who've been sending me pictures of their families, their kids dressed up. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I love the way you guys go to town with Halloween. It's amazing. So happy Halloween to those of you who've just finished celebrating that. And a welcome to anybody who's just joining me live now. Yeah, it is. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Fiona Lukeis. I specialize in the relationship space, and I like to come at this from a really different direction where we are looking at relationships through the lens of what it is to be human rather than all that complicated information that's out there about personality types and attachment styles and all the other stuff that I think we can get bogged down in. So if you are someone who wants to know more about relationships, feel free to share this live with anyone who you think may benefit. I am currently live on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you do have a question that you want to ask me, you can send it in via email. Just mark in the subject line Friday Live Q&A, and we will add it to the list of questions that gets sent into me each and every week. We're currently 2 weeks behind roughly with answering of questions in terms of getting through the questions that have come through. So the quicker you send them in, the quicker I can get them answered for you. And if you are tuning in live, as always, I love you to, really appreciate people saying hi and letting me know where they're tuning in from. I love the global audience that the internet provides for us, and the fact that we can all be in different time zones and be sharing this space and time together. And for those of you who have a question you want to ask in real time, the good thing about showing up live is generally your questions will get answered in real time. So by all means, ask a question and I will do my absolute best to answer it for you. It can be about anything. I don't mind whatever you want to throw my way. Now, obviously, when I go live each week, I share where I can. I answer the questions that come in, and I also share where things have shown up where there's been patterns or things that have shown up in my client work or with the students in my signature program, Relatable, where I teach this step by step and where I run live calls, and we just have a wonderful, wonderful time together. So there's always themes that pop up via those two things. And if I ever have time, I will share them with you here, because I figure if there's themes coming up with my clients and with my students, then it is something that's relevant to a wider audience. But if there is something that you would specifically like me to address that I haven't, that you haven't heard me address before, or you'd like more information around or context around, please, please, please feel free to ask. It's amazing how many emails, DMs I get from people after I run a live saying, oh my goodness, that was so helpful. That question that was asked, that was my question. I'm so glad that somebody asked it. And, thank you so much for your answer, Fiona. It's really helped me understand things and know what to do, all of that kind of jazz. All right. So, by all means, don't be shy, ask your questions and watch the ripple effects, because I'm an enormous believer in ripple effects and that everything we do benefits the whole. And this is about the whole, right? It really, really is. And relationships are a fantastic example of how one person can create a change that benefits the whole. It's amazing. So, and yet another one of the gazillion reasons why I absolutely love talking about them. I love being in this space, and why it just feels so fresh for me each and every day when it comes to sharing or talking about this, because the impact that it has when we show up to our relationships differently, when we become more relatable, when we understand the human condition, when we understand the nature of what it is to be human, the ripple effects of that are enormous, no matter what you are dealing with in your life. So if you have just tuned in, feel free to say hi. And hey, Christy, thank you so much for saying hi. Love to know where you're listening from. Sandy, hello, I know where you're listening from. Thank you so much for saying hi, Sandy. And anybody else out there who's just joining us, please let me know. And if you are listening from YouTube, let me know. I'm kind of newish, which I know sounds crazy because YouTube's been around forever, but I've only just really started going live on YouTube I think this year maybe, or last year. Hi, Anita. Thanks for saying hi. You're in New Zealand. Welcome, welcome. Nice to have a New Zealander here. Okay, so I'm going to go to the first question that's been sent through to me. Now, I generally just have a really quick look at these before I go live. So just bear with me here. But all right, so the question I've got here is, hello, Fiona. I'm new to your content, but I've listened to several calls and found the information to resonate and be helpful. I've been in a bad marriage for many years now, about 8. We have 2 kids together, ages 7 and 4. It's taken me several years to understand or to realize how my husband's brain works differently than mine. And I know I have a lot of bad relationship patterns from divorced, high conflict parents. What is your perspective on emotional abuse and toxic relationships? How do I know when it's something due to low or no goodwill that can be recovered, or when it's toxic beyond that and is unhealthy for the family? I've often wondered if I can heal or change the dynamics enough myself to make it healthy. Thank you for taking the time to address this subject. Okay. Alrighty. Now, hang on one sec. I'm just going to close down something so I can get back to here. All right. Catherine, my husband constantly tells me, hey, Catherine, the relationship is over. What do I do? Leave or stay? He won't do any sort of counseling. I'll come back to that question, Catherine. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Fiona from cloudy, half sun out from Airlie Beach. Airlie Beach, if those of you who don't know who are overseas, is an absolutely beautiful part of Australia. Like, it's ridiculous. Airlie Beach is amazing. It's everything you've probably heard about Australia on any kind of touristy, the touristy side. It's right up north. It's warm. It's right near the Great Barrier Reef and that whole big, gorgeous part of the world. It's stunning. So hi from Airlie Beach, Sharon. Daughter's 40th birthday. Happy birthday to your daughter. Okay, Catherine, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to finish answering this question. So, what's my perspective on emotional abuse and toxic relationships? Look, great question. I guess my perspective on emotional abuse, and I first of all want to say, for those of you who don't know me, I am well aware so some of the things that I say may sound like I haven't experienced emotional abuse. I have. I fled a domestic violent relationship a long time ago now, but when my boys, who are now in their early 20s, were 5 and 3, and it was horrific. And one of the darkest, most difficult periods of my life. I completely lost myself. I felt broken. I'm unrecognizable now to the person I was then. So when I answer this question, please know I'm answering it with that in my background. So I'm not saying this as someone because it can sound like this is a bit too simplistic, what I'm about to say, but this understanding was the one thing that changed the darkness for me, that lingered in my life for years after I left. Okay. So I'm about to answer this, but I want you to know that is in my background, and I'm well aware of what I'm saying and what it is like to be in a relationship like that. All right. So anyway, coming back to this question, I think when it comes to emotional abuse and toxic relationships, the big thing that we have to understand is the fact that when my mind is not clear, when I'm overthinking, when my mind is racing, when I am frightened, when I'm triggered, okay? There are things that look like emotional abuse that when my mind is quieter, do not. Okay? So there are things that look like emotional abuse, but when my mind is quieter, do not. So understanding, you've heard me talk about this a lot. I am a massive, and I cannot emphasize this to you all enough, and it doesn't get discussed enough in the relationship space, in my opinion. We're way too concerned about attachment styles and love languages, and I'm not saying those things aren't helpful, but without understanding how the mind works and clarity of mind and an appreciation of that, it's very hard to get any traction around those just by looking at those things. It really is, because people get stuck in their differences and they think the differences are the problem. Truly, they're not. Really, they're not. Okay? Really, they're not. But when I don't have clarity of mind, it is hard for me to know which end is up, what's right, what isn't right. And so when my mind is not clear, I can be, and when I say I mean we, as the human collective, right? And I say we because this is true for all of us. Okay, this is just one of those things that is true for all of us. When my mind is not clear, when my mind is racing, when I'm overthinking, when I'm ruminating, I don't have the capacity to see things very clearly. I don't have a large capacity for any form of understanding. And so I take things personally. I get defensive. I'm easily offended. So remember, I'm talking about we, this is how we all are. And so I can then become very adversarial. Now, when I can't become adversarial, another person becomes adversarial and we start mirroring each other. Now, when I'm locked into a space where I think I'm right, okay, where I think I'm right and I can't see anything other than that, I could potentially look at another person and say, you're being abusive. But they could just as easily look at me and say I'm being abusive. I mean, anyone who yells and screams or who shuts down or does some of the things that people do when they're triggered could be labeled as abusive, right? I mean, where does that label begin and end? So what I guess what I'm saying is it's when my mind is clear, and you've got to understand when our mind is clear, our level of expansiveness, what we can see and our capacity to understand is this big, right? When my mind is not clear, my mind is this big and there's not as much as I can see. So no matter what is going on in my life, I'm always operating from and waiting for clarity of mind to see what is true and what is not true. Because when our mind is overthinking, things look like a distortion. And then we don't have the emotional intelligence to handle them. And I'm not saying that you need to sacrifice yourself or sweep things under a carpet, but it is amazing how differently we show up to whatever it is. Clarity of mind is just massive. I was actually talking about this with my relatable students on Wednesday because one of them was talking about boundaries, and because that's something that they've struggled with. And I said, boundaries are something we naturally do when our mind is clear, because we know it, we just naturally do it. We do it really well. It's just that most people are trying to set boundaries from a place where they feel hurt, where they're reactive, where they're scared, frightened, where they don't have clarity of mind. And so it comes from a very, very different place. Okay. And it feels harder because it feels like you're going against yourself. When your mind is clear, there's this flow within you. Okay. There's a flow that has you not frightened of what someone else is or isn't doing, has you very grounded, comfortable in your own skin. And grounded people who are comfortable in their own skin find it much easier to say, no, I'm not doing that, than someone who is not, who's frightened, who's worried, who's trying to micromanage a situation, who's right. It's just interesting. Anyway, so I'll come back to that in a second. So when it comes to abusive and toxic relationships, these are the things that are really important to me. Okay. Now, when my mind is clear, and if I'm looking through that lens, and so with a clearer mind, we're a lot more neutral. Okay, we're a lot more neutral, and so when we're a lot more neutral, we have the capacity to see things without all the emotion clouding everything and getting in the way. And emotion clouding everything can make us stay in a relationship that's not good for us, and it can have us leave a relationship prematurely because we're not in the right frame of mind either. Okay, so this is why I talk about the importance of this so much, and it's the first thing I teach in my program and with my clients. So my clients know they have that as their grounding space. They know where they are. This is very empowering if you're dealing with anything in life. Okay, and we have different thinking when our mind is clear, completely different. It's like two different realities of the same thing, which is fascinating. And one of those things that I guess you've got to experience in real time for yourself to really see what I'm talking about. So, and of course, there are definitely toxic and emotionally abusive relationships out there. Okay, absolutely. So how do I know when something's due to low or no goodwill that can be recovered? Well, I guess it's a matter of when you're able to show up in a more neutral frame of mind, where you know where you are and you know that you're not bringing anything into the mix that's going to inflame things, that you can then see and go, yep, no, I can see where I am. I can see that I'm, you know what I mean? I'm not bringing anything extra. This is definitely not a low goodwill thing. There is something else going on here. So, I've often had people do my programs who will say, I'm in an abusive relationship. They get clarity of mind, they feel calmer, they soften, they're more understanding, they get more curious instead of playing the emotional ping pong that so many people make. And a lot of them are amazed at the change in the other person. The other person calms down. The other person relaxes. They start to create emotional safety. They start to build a history of dealing with conflict well. And it's quite surprising that some relationships that look like they're emotionally abusive and toxic, because people are in that cycle with each other because their frailties are out, their insecurities, that's what they're leading with. There's no goodwill. That can happen, right, in relationships when you're in that cycle. But it's amazing when people step out of that cycle and the best of them comes out and they start to remember that in each other, a lot of that stuff falls away. So, I know there are exceptions to what I'm saying. The relationship I left all those years ago was one of them, but they are fewer. Those types of relationships are fewer than the abusive, toxic ones that we talk about a lot. Truly, because when you give a person a chance to put their self defenses down, to not feel like they're walking on eggshells, to actually feel more connected. It's amazing how differently people can show up. And then when you build that emotional connection, when you build that sense of emotional safety, it is amazing how things can change. But of course, I appreciate there are always exceptions to these things. Okay, so how do you know? The way that you know is when you understand, and again, this is one of the gifts of this, is when you understand where you are and that you've been showing up from a neutral, building goodwill, peaceful frame of mind. And if there's no traction on the other side, that's how you know. You also know, but when your mind is clear. So when we're in a good feeling and it still looks like a good idea for me to leave, okay, that's when you know where your truth is. So our truth lies, or access to our truth is always when our mind is clear, when we've got clarity. Okay, this is why I talk about it so much. So I know the difference in myself when my mind is clear and when it isn't, when I have thinking I can trust and when I have thinking I cannot trust. This is why I say thought is the greatest con artist on earth. Okay, it's not that you need to change your thinking. I'm not talking about that, and I'm not saying you've got to be positive, but you do need to be able to navigate it a bit differently. You need to know when you've got thinking you can trust and when you can't trust. Okay, very, very important, because it's where we are able to stand in our truth and our own power and make completely different decisions and have very different conversations that are more curious, emotionally intelligent, where we're not worrying about what another person is or isn't doing, and we're better able to stay in our own emotional lane. That's when you get traction, if there's traction to be had. Okay. So I guess to me, that's how I know. If I show up and I'm neutral and I'm not adding fuel to the fire, and I do that consistently for a period of time and I get no traction, that's when I need to say, okay, all right, maybe this just isn't the right relationship for me. And if you've been doing that and the other person has got stuff that they're dealing with and they're not prepared to look at it, they're not prepared to take any ownership over it, they're not prepared to do anything with that, okay, that's feedback to you that, okay, if I'm going to stay here, I either accept what that other person the way they are and stop living out of the hope that they're going to change, or right, I come to a place of peace within myself that this is where the relationship is, and if they're not going to do anything about that, and I've done everything I can, this is as good as it gets. Is that okay with me? Right? Is it okay with me? A lot of people don't allow themselves to be in that space. They keep hoping and wishing that the other person will change, and they keep right looking more and more and more and more and more and more for answers. Does that make sense? This is what I mean. Sometimes you'll have this clarity where you'll just see it, and it may not be forever, but it'll be moments where you see it and you're like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm at. This is as good as it gets. Is this okay with me? Now, sometimes we don't like the answer that we hear there, right? because then we go into all the how. But if it's not as good as it's going to get, what do I do? How do I move this? How do I change this? How do I find the money to leave? What about the kids? And what, we get caught up in the how, and then our minds, we lose the clarity, because it looks like I need to know the how. If you get clarity around something, and I think this is very important, give yourself the space to just be with that clarity, even if it's a realization that's frightening to you. You don't need to do anything with it straight away, okay? But you need to give yourself time to let it marinate and sink in. We don't do that. We bounce a lot. Us humans, we bounce. And so when we bounce, we lose clarity, and then we go in that, oh, I don't know, will I, won't I, will I, won't I, will I, won't I, will I, won't I. We can be like that for years, right? I've had people come to me who've been in that situation for decades, okay? And so it's really important. If you are getting clarity, and maybe it's scary, maybe it's not what you want, but you kind of know that you need to do, just give yourself some time to be with that. It's very important, because when we do that, we will get the thinking we need to accommodate that. Things will line up in our lives that will show us the pathway forward. This is, I mean, I could talk about that, just that, for another hour, but that's for another conversation. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. Okay. So, Catherine, my husband constantly tells me the relationship is over. What do I do? Leave or stay? He won't do any sort of counselling. Well, I guess the question is, honey, what is it that you want? What do you want here? Right? And it's not just enough to say, I want my marriage to work. Okay? That's great that if you want your marriage to work, but how do you want to feel? When I say want, how do you want to feel? Right? What's the feeling you want to live your life in? What do you want for yourself? Because remember, the feeling is the only way we experience anything. It's by the quality of the feeling we're in. Okay? You've got to ask yourself that question first, and then look at whether that relationship is a match for that. All right? Very, 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 very important. Catherine, I get told to fuck off, and I can't hang up on silent treatment. I'm always begging for him to say it because I made him say those things. I made him do it. What do you mean you made him do it, honey? What does that mean? You made him do it. I think you need to give me a little bit more context around that, because that does sound, like a really toxic cycle for both of you, okay? When you say you made him do it, that's a big load to carry, and I don't know how true that is. So I really appreciate you sharing that, honey. If you could give me a little bit more context, that would be really helpful. Christy. Hi, Fiona from Northern California. I've listened to your ebook over and over again on my walks each morning. Each time I learn something new, I'm just about finished with relationships that thrive. Love it all. Awesome, Christy. That's fantastic. Thank you for letting me know. I really, really, really appreciate that. I'm so glad to hear that it is so helpful to you. Really, thank you. Really, really appreciate that. Okay, Catherine, if you are still here, can you just give me a little bit more context, honey? Because I'd really like to help you, all right? And I know that you won't be the only one going through what you're going through, and so it will help other people. Okay. He tells me I make him say nasty and hurtful things. All right. Do you believe that to be true? Do you believe that to be true? Just because someone says something, by the way, doesn't make it true. Okay, great. You don't believe it's true. All right. Okay. Thank you for being honest, honey. So if you don't believe that's true, this is very important. All right. You don't believe that that's true. So then the question you have to ask yourself is, right, how come you're begging for him to stay? Because you just said to me, I'm begging for him to stay because I made him say those things, right? Because it's very important for you to know what is true and what is not true. This is what I call one of the aspects of clarity of mind. All right? Yeah. See, it's something that you've got to understand when we take ownership over something that doesn't belong to us, and I see this in relationships all the time, okay? So if you're doing that, you're not alone. It's super, super common. But the problem when you take ownership over things that don't belong to you. And this is the power of clarity of mind. When you have clarity of mind, you'll stop doing that because it won't make sense to you anymore. Okay? It won't. When we take ownership over things that don't belong to us, we end up being someone else's emotional regulator. Okay? We end up being someone else's emotional regulator. Now, that is where toxic cycles can get out of control. It is not your job to be someone else's emotional regulator. People must learn to regulate their own emotions. You're an adult. That is absolutely on you. And if you're not great at regulating your own emotions, and I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say, I was not. I was terrible at it. I was terrible at it. If you're not great at it, you need to do something about that because it destroys people. And I know if you're someone who's not good at regulating your emotions, you would be feeling ashamed of that. I had deep shame about that. I did. I had deep shame about that. And especially because I'd done so much study, so many things, and I was terrible at that. Right? If you are in a relationship where you are someone else's emotional regulator, you must, please hear me out. You must get help for that. Please, because that is soul destroying. It's soul destroying. I know what that feels like. All right? Not your job to be someone else's emotional regulator. And understand every time you do that. So actually, I should just check in. Do you guys know what I mean when I say I use the term emotional regulator? Do you know what I mean by that? Does anyone need me to clarify? I shouldn't assume that you know what I mean by that. Okay? Let me know if you guys know what I mean, or if there's someone listening to me who doesn't know what I mean by that. Okay, because this is a very, very important topic. Okay, so you know what I mean by that? Okay, cool. All right. So people who get angry, and there's different ways in which we can show aggression, all right? Aggression isn't just in yelling and screaming. Aggression is shutting down, stonewalling, okay? Hey Fiona, cool, no worries. Thanks for telling me, honey, and I'll explain what I mean, right? So aggression isn't just a verbal or physical thing externally. It's also an internal thing. People who shut down and stonewall, that's very aggressive because you're withdrawing love, right? That's a form of aggression. So, with you're someone who's yelling or screaming or someone who's shutting down, I used to do both. Awesome. That sounds fantastic, don't I? I would get really upset, then I would shut down and stonewall. So I was, like my husband, lucky guy. But you know what? That had a lot to do with the abusive relationship I'd fled from because I just had no voice, and it was just, and other things. And I'm not excusing my behavior at all. I'm totally responsible for it. But I couldn't regulate myself, so I would yell and scream, and how I would regulate, and this is how people often do. Okay, it's very common. A lot of people will regulate in terms. So when I mean regulate, they feel better by hurting somebody else. Right? That's how they feel better. It's like it gives them this. Okay, so if you're in a situation like that, or you're the person doing it, you might find that you yell and scream, and it's not until the other person gets upset that you feel a bit calmer. That's how you regulate yourself, by upsetting and hurting somebody else. If you are in that pattern, or you are the person doing that, you need to go and get help straight away. You need to sort that out. It is not okay to inflict that on the people around you. And if you are in a cycle where you are doing the regulating, please go and get some help around that. Please. This is like the most important aspect of your life. This is where you spend your time with this person, in this relationship, in this feeling. Why would you ever want to live in a feeling like that when you don't have to? Truly, guys, seriously, this is your life. This is your life. You do not need to do that. But you must stop regulating someone else's emotions, because the problem when you regulate them, okay, is the other person just feels more and more entitled to project them onto you. Okay, so here's the ways in which people regulate. So in other words, they try and calm someone else down. That's what regulating someone's emotions is. They're trying to calm somebody down. Okay, so here's the ways in which we do that. We kind of go, look, it's okay, it's not a big deal. And look, and you can do that a bit, right? I'm not saying don't ever do that. But if that's happening every time, or if you're begging forgiveness, no. You're now regulating them. You're now letting them know. Like, do you understand? You're what you're saying to them is, you're right. It is my fault. You're right. It is my problem. You're right. I need to change. You're right. You're right. You're right. And every time someone feels right, they just feel more entitled. They feel more entitled. If you're justifying yourself, so if someone says to you, for example, let's just say you were going out for a drink with friends, and you said that you would call, but maybe you forgot, and maybe you've got home, I don't know, half an hour later or an hour later, or what, you've come home later than you said you would. And that person starts screaming and yelling at you. Well, I wouldn't be yelling at you if you told me what you were doing. You need to explain what you're doing. Just because you didn't tell them does not give them the right to scream at you. Okay? That does not make that your fault. How we react is on us. Absolutely. It's very, very, very important. You are not responsible for another person's emotions like that, right? That's absolutely up to them to sort out, and they need to learn how to do it. And like I just said, if you're the one doing it, you must learn how to do this, or you will lose everything. Okay? Don't stick your head in the sand. Don't tell yourself that you can work this out yourself, because you can't. And how many people say that to me? It drives me crazy. They ask me for help, they'll come to me, and then they'll say, it's okay, I can do it myself. And I'm like, you're suffering, you're stuck. The disconnect is huge. You've been like this for ages, and you're going to tell me you're going to do it yourself. I don't get it. Like, it makes no sense to me. That would be like me taking my car to the mechanic, right? The car's not working, and the mechanic's saying, I'll fix that for you. Oh no, I'll do it myself. I'm like, why? Why make life hard for yourself when the answer's right there? Like, it makes no sense. But anyway, we're all funny little humans, and we do things in our own way, in our own time. But this is very, very important. So if you are in a situation of abuse where you're just yelling and screaming at each other and no one's listening, so that's a cycle of where you're just abusing each other, right? Or that's where you go with each other when there's differences, right? And a lot of relationships are in that cycle. It doesn't mean that either one of you are abusive people. It's just the pattern that you've fallen into when your frailties are out. Okay. And so many people do this. That's the pattern that they fall into with each other. If you're in that pattern, it's very, very, very important. One of you can break it. And part of that is recognizing when you have thinking you can trust and when you can't, understanding what's going on. And then you don't buy into other people's stuff. You stop because you have these incredible realizations, because you have this clarity, that doesn't belong to me. That's not mine. That has nothing to do with me. And so you don't engage in the same way. And so when you don't engage in the same way, the other person is left to work it out for themselves, which is very good for them. Very, very good for them. All right. Being in an intimate relationship does not mean that you are someone else's emotional regulator. No. It's very unhealthy. It's exhausting for you, and the other person doesn't grow. Just keeps you trapped in the drama cycle. All right? The drama cycle where you're kind of rescuing the other person instead of saying to them, hey, you've got what it takes to work that out. Go work it out. Come back to me when you're not so angry, please, and we'll talk. All right. Right. You're yelling and screaming right now. I'm not gonna talk to you while you're yelling and screaming. Come back to me when you're clearer, and I'll have a conversation with you then. You made me do this. No, I did not. Come back and see me when you feel calmer. Okay. I'm not doing this with you right now. What you're doing is, instead of yelling and screaming, you're calling them on it and saying, hey, that's not okay. Okay. That's not okay with me. Please don't speak to me like that. I don't deserve it. It's not okay. Come back to me when you're calmer. Now, if that person's never able to do that, then you have to make some decisions about whether you want to live in that cycle. And then you have to decide if you're in a cycle that's there, if you're in that cycle and you don't want to look at what your options are because you are frightened. And I get it. Okay. I was all those years ago when I had to leave. I was very frightened. I was terrified. I understand that, truly. But when I got access to knowing when my mind was clear and when it wasn't, it was unbelievable. The fear fell away. I had this unbelievable faith and trust in myself, in life, and a knowingness that I would be okay. And it was incredibly freeing. Now, I have not lost that in all these years, and I take that knowing everywhere I go. And it has fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life, the quality of my life, quality of my relationships, my level of joy, well-being. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And these were things that I didn't have much of in my life. And not just because I was in that cycle. Just the way I was overthinking everything. I was frightened of things. I didn't have a great relationship with life. I didn't trust that things would be okay. I would overthink everything and I would just get stuck in that. And I was a very, what's the word? Fragile, not strong, but fragile. And struggle to connect, was not comfortable in my own skin. And my life and my relationships were a reflection of that. And when I say my life and my relationships, I mean everywhere. I mean financially, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and in my relationships. Like, this was reflected everywhere. And this is the thing that's amazing. This is what's on offer for you when you have this understanding in life. That's why I'm so passionate about it. Everything changed for me financially, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and obviously in all of my relationships. Like, in my mind, it's like this no-brainer. Okay? If you are in a relationship where you are desperately unhappy, where you are stuck, where you are frightened, where you are in a cycle where you are regulating someone's emotions, please, please, please know, okay, that is not, what's the word? That is not what you deserve. Okay? You didn't do anything to deserve that. You haven't done anything wrong. It is not your fault. But you do need to take some action and create some change. Okay? Life is too short to live in the experience of that. But if you're not sure, just learn this for yourself so you can have the emotional freedom that you're looking for, and then you can see what makes sense to you from there. Okay? It always starts with you. As much as we don't want to acknowledge that, it does, just like it did for me all those years ago. I'm not saying it was my fault that my partner at the time was like that. That's on him. But how I showed up to that was definitely on me. And it wasn't until I got clarity of mind, and I still remember the night that I did all those years ago. It's like I remember it so clearly. I didn't know what I knew then, but I got clarity of mind one night. I remember the thinking. I remember the where I was in the house, what I was doing, and it changed the trajectory of everything for me. My mind got clear, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. And the fear was there, but it wasn't in charge anymore. And I was able to take the steps I needed to take to leave and move forward with my life. Is this making sense to you guys? Is this helpful? I just want to check in. Hey, Sharon. Sorry. Hey, Susan. Just saw you there. Hi, darling. Thank you for saying hi. And Deezer, hello. My relationships in my life are forever changing. Thank you, Fiona. Oh, you're so welcome, Deezer. You're so welcome, honey. Okay, that's clear for you, Fiona. Awesome. All right. Anyone else? Let me know if this is making sense. The first step, okay, to not being someone else's emotional regulator, in my opinion, is being able to navigate yourself differently. Okay, truly. I'm more likely to become someone else's emotional regulator when I don't have a clear mind, when I'm overthinking, when I'm worried, when I'm fearful, when my insecurities are at play. So in other words, whatever my habits of being have been, they're going to come out when my mind is not clear, right? That's just how it works. When my mind is clear, something else shows up and something else makes sense. It's just that so many of us don't know the difference because we're so busy-minded and we overthink constantly, and we've got such a high tolerance for being in a very busy mind. All right? We do. I would say truly 100% of people that come to me have such a massively high tolerance for being in a busy mind that they don't even realize where they are. Hence why people learn this and their minds become quieter and clearer, and they'll be like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe how fast I was going. No wonder I couldn't see the forest for the trees. Like, I can't believe the thinking that I'm getting access to now because there's just more room in my head. I have emotional bandwidth You need to have emotional bandwidth to create change, okay? Right? Most of us don't have it because we are thinking about everything all of the time. And it looks like we have to because this is just the way life is, right? I've got kids to think about, I've got work, I've got, the economy, I've got friendships, I've got my finances, I've got my weight, I've got, like, you know what I mean? It's just all this stuff, and it looks like because of all this, I can't have clarity of mind. That is not true. That is absolutely not true. You can have clarity of mind at any time, irrespective of what's going on out here. And to me, that is the absolute truth of what emotional freedom is that I can have access to clarity of mind no matter what's going on out here. To me, that is emotional freedom. And I think that's what we all need in order for us to recognize what our truth is. And your truth is unique to you, right? Everybody's truth is different. There's no right way. There's no right anything. And I have people coming to me in all sorts of situations that work for them that may not work for somebody else. But when you're comfortable in your own skin, when your mind is clear, when you know your truth, you own that stuff without feeling like you have to defend it to somebody else. Right. Christy, I will never forget the moment when my husband finally acknowledged, not to me, but I could see it in his face, that he was projecting his insecurities on me through verbal aggression. Yeah. Wow. That must have been a huge moment, Christy. Huge. Good for him. Good for him. That takes humility and courage. And I admire that in people. Really, I do. I really admire that. When people have the courage and the humility to look inside themselves and say, hey, maybe there's something for me to learn. Maybe there's something here that I could do differently, and not through the lens of I'm a terrible, awful person. That's just more ego upon ego. But when you're actually sitting with it and you're with yourself and going, you know what? Maybe there's something here that I need to see differently. Maybe some things that there are for me to learn, and we have the humility and the grace to see it. It's very important. That's why humility is such a very important thing to me. I'm always checking in to see, am I humble enough? And I'm still a work in progress around that. And it's a great barometer for me as to where I am and how I'm showing up in the world. Okay. If I always think I'm right, if I'm never wrong, and I used to be very addicted to being right. If I'm not reflective and looking at where I'm at, and I'm noticing things not through the lens of self-criticism and shame, but through the lens of, oh wow, thank you for the realization of me seeing that in myself. Now I get to do something different. Now I get to create change, and then doing something about that is so important. I can't tell you this enough. You are all far more powerful than you give yourselves credit for. I wish I could show you all that. Truly, you'd be amazed at what one person can do, right? Even if it doesn't get you the result that you want, what you can do, the ripple effects of that, I can't even tell you. Huge, 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 huge. Hey, Sandy, your passion is so deep. Yes, it is. It really is. I don't. Your message tonight has resonated so much with me. This has been most of my married life, but relatable has helped me find so much clarity and truth. Thank you. You're so welcome, honey. As always, I think you're just the most beautiful, divine lady, Sandy, too. Person, gorgeous. Christy, unfortunately, it only happened through me exploding at him. Okay, so maybe that's what needed to happen, Christy, right? To start change, start things shifting. Hey, Peter. Hello. So nice to see you, Peter. Nothing like a fee reality check once in a while. It's one of the best learnings from you. All our realities are different, and it's up to us to manage how we show up, handle ourselves. Still learning, Fiona. I know, Peter. Thank you. It's so lovely to hear from you, honey. Okay, everyone. Wow, I've been raving on here for 44 minutes. I'm sure everyone's sick of the sound of my voice. I'll stop talking now. Sending you all love. I hope this has been helpful. If there is someone that you think who needs to hear this, feel free to share it with them. If you have a question that you want to ask me, email it to Fiona. Fiona Lukeis at Fiona at fionalukeis.com.au and Market Friday Live Q&A. And if you want to know more about Relatable's amazing, guys, like truly, truly, truly awesome. If you want to know about it or see if that's something that would be a good fit for you, I will send you a link to have a chat with me. All right. It's nice and cruisy, no pressure, but I think you deserve to give yourself a chance to find out and see if this is something that you would like to have in your life. All right, everyone, I'll put the link to book a chat with me there, and I will see you all next Friday. Okay, take care, everyone. Ciao.